and it will also be recorded for administration purposes. Is there anybody else in here that will be recording it, just for our information? Very good. No apologies. Is there any conflicts of interest? Good, thank you. So we've got a public forum, and we've got Justin and Kim who are going to come and speak to us. You have a total of 10 minutes and then 5 minutes for questions. And from talking to you, you probably don't need all that. Thank you. So go ahead.
Kia ora everybody, thanks very much for the time this morning, we really appreciate it. Kim Hooper, Justin Lotusthorpe, we're board members for Napier City Business Incorporated. We trust you know a little bit about what we do. I think Zoe's been in a couple of council meetings over the past few meetings, but essentially we represent about 450 business owners and property owners within the confines of the CBD. And the good thing for us and for council, I think, is that we get a good feel for some of the key issues that are happening for those business owners and property owners in the CBD. So obviously parking and safety are hot topics, but one that really stuck out for us last year was the potential impact of large format retail developments. Currently some of the key ones being supported by council across the city. So just to be clear, we're not questioning the validity of those projects or the retailers or the developers at all, but we do have some questions around the consultation process for those projects, and in particular we believe that there's a retail strategy review sometime this year by council, so we felt it was a good time to come and touch base really and give you some thoughts from those businesses. So just for clarification, we've decided to call them large format retail developments, and so that's the likes of the Kmart development on Prebertson Road, the proposed Taradale Road development, and obviously the gravel pit development. So those are the kind of developments that we're talking about today. I guess our first key one is that the majority of those are within 2.5 kilometres of the CBD. And yet the businesses in the CBD don't have an opportunity to be consulted on those projects. So currently those are non-notified developments, so those businesses in the CBD can't have their say about what sort of impact that those developments are going to have on their businesses. And we're aware that there are some reports saying that the economic impact of those developments on the CBD are minimal, and we just don't agree. Frankly, we just don't agree with that. So the first one, I guess, is that we're asking for a higher level of oversight from the council on these projects. We certainly know that council staff tend to look at these in isolation as opposed to the sum effect of these projects across the city. So obviously they've had a fairly negative effect in Hastings. We've seen that. Hiratonga Street is pretty much a zombie land due to the developments that have occurred around there. And I'm a retailer out there, I know exactly that's why we don't retail on Hiratonga Street. We really just don't want that happening in Napier, to be frank. So the first one is we're asking that these projects be notified, or advocating that these projects be notified or have limited notification, so groups such as our members can consult or feedback to the council about the effect that these may have on our businesses. The second key one is around secondary services or supplementary services included in these consents. So generally what will happen, this is a very layman's explanation, but generally what they'll do is they'll submit a plan for a consent. They'll say we're building a Kmart, there'll be 1,000 square metres in a box that will say supplementary or secondary services, but we're not told what they are. Now invariably that ends up being hospitality, which is the case, or it seems to be the case in the Kmart development. So 1,000 square metres of hospitality is 9 to 10 times the size of the average eatery on Emerson Street. So to say that won't have an economic impact on those businesses just doesn't cut it for us. We think it's fair that our businesses have a say on what goes in there. Now, even if that Kmart development was notified, that wouldn't have got picked up, because currently under the retail strategy that council has, those services don't need to be notified. So we think there's a bit of a loophole there, particularly for hospitality. We'd like to see hospitality included in a notification, and particularly council and its ratepayers be told what's going into that development right from the start, so that we can have a say and consult on it. We think that's fair. And ultimately, I guess the last one is what is the sum effect of these projects? You know, what's going to happen to the CBD if we continue to support these large-scale developments around the CBD? Yeah, and we're pretty concerned about that, to be frank, for the CBD. We obviously trade, or Napier trades on its Art Deco and its township feel, and we really, you know, our businesses, our members are really investing in that township feel, and yeah, so we've got a few concerns around that. We did distribute a paper, so I think the rest of the information's in that paper, but we're happy to take questions. Take any questions?
Are you going to, do you want to speak? Okay. So do we have any questions, please?
Thank you guys for coming in to talk to us. I suppose I've got a question around earlier in your discussion you talked about projects being supported by council. Do you just mean in terms of the planning framework that we have?
Yeah, I think so. I guess it's just a district plan. I mean, they're allowed for in the district plan without notification, effectively, and so it's not a moral support of those projects. It's really just that they're allowed to go through without any consultation for people that are most affected. It disappoints us, I guess, that we're aware of reports that say that the economic impact is minimal, when we just don't agree with that, and a consultation would bring that to light, even a limited consultation. Yeah.
So through you, Mr. Chair, if I was, I suppose, to summarise what you're doing for us here today is flagging that you would see some changes in the district plan through the review that you'd like to advocate for.
Yeah, we think so. Yeah.
Yeah. So that would be the best result council could give you.
Absolutely, yeah. I think there was some good work done by council in 2003 to start protecting the CBD through its retail strategy. We think that strategy's ageing, obviously, and needs review. And we think that, you know, some of those little tweaks and fine tunes will really nail it. But it's just about giving people a voice, I think. You know, those businesses are investing a lot. A lot of them are mortgaged to the help to be in there and to create vibrancy in the city. And we think it's fair that they have a say. Thank you.
Councillor Tapani.
Thanks for coming in. So I'm going to assume by your comments today that even though they weren't notified and it was a perfectly legal process for an entity to go through, the network itself, business network in Napier, wasn't engaged or consulted around the impacts of such a significant shift in retail operations in the city, or was there an opportunity for NBI to participate?
No, we were approached for information,
Okay.
but we weren't approached to consult on it, no.
Okay.
Yeah.
The other question I have through you, Mr. Chair, is we've got a number of big challenges going forward, and definitely looking after and being cognizant of the specific requirements of our retail sector, our small employers, our large employers, and changes in retail demographics. Some of the conversations we're having have been around perhaps looking at panels to help specialise around the development of strategies. Do you see any worth in there being perhaps a panel which looks at actively participating in the retail strategy and ongoing opportunities to feed into, say, resource consents which may have an impact inside our CBD? Do you see that there's an opportunity or perhaps value in formulating something over and above the RMA process?
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you look at who makes up those retailers, it's not just retailers, this is hospital as well, but if you look at who makes it, you know, it's probably 50-50 in terms of owner-operators in the regions, as well as big businesses that tend to be based out of Auckland. But I think, you know, it's a fast-moving industry at the moment. We're losing some good retail stores in the CBD because they can't cut it, and a lot of that, you know, they're not feeling the love. That's the general sentiment out there. Not all of that is to do with council, of course, but I think any opportunity to have a say and be on a panel like that to give advice directly from the horse's mouth, I think would be welcomed. Yeah.
Got it.
Thank you.
I think one of the important side of you can get a panel like that together is you can get a lot of perspectives that you might not be able to see where some of the loopholes can be. So being on the other side of the fence, you know, there's a lot of energy goes into how you work around the council's rules to get things through, and this is an area where we could probably provide a bit more insight, having been on the other side of the fence ourselves.
Cool. Thank you very much.
Councillor Bogue.
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. I think I was on the council when that proposal was put, and I do recall Tony Jeffrey was on council at the time and raised the issues you're raising, but I think that our hands were tied. So we were aware of that, and he was speaking for himself really, not on behalf of the retail industry, but he was a business owner operator at the time on Emerson Street and drew our attention to those issues. So, yeah, the process, I agree, could have been better.
Any other questions?
Sorry, one really weird one, if I might, Mr. Chair.
Certainly.
So, sorry, just as I've been listening to the conversation and the questions, given the complexities of the changes, given there is quite clearly not only a global but national push around trying to mix the offerings in retail, and there's a big focus on those big box. Do you think it's realistic this sort of leans on from my last question around a panel that's based on community members? Do you think we're pushing the envelope a little bit to be looking at how we might be able to protect the current way we're doing things as opposed to identifying how we might modify the changes that are happening within our spaces? So I'm worried. The thought that pops into my head is if we establish a panel and we look at building a strategy that meets the needs of our specific city, I would be a little bit hesitant around, is that putting protectionism in place over existing operations and not identifying how we could look to future operations? Given that big box is very different to our mum and pop bricks and mortar type setup or an accommodation type setup, it's a very different approach and comes with a very different backing and focus. I'm just conscious that I think the panel's a great idea, but I'm also looking for any insight or opportunity from our business sector around we're still open-minded to addressing our current way of operating.
No, I think it's a really good point, and that's why we've said we're not questioning the validity of those developments. The reality is the city's got to progress, but you can coexist. I think one of the keys is having earlier oversight in the consenting process from the people that oversee, which is you guys really. That's a key one for us. But I think, you can have a Kmart with a supporting, a secondary service is essentially like the Mitre 10 on Pemberton is a classic one. So it has a cafe in it, but you can't access that cafe from external. You have to go through the Kmart. That is a supporting service. It's generally there for the people that visit that site. Having 1,000 square metre food court isn't. We would argue that it's already being provided. All we're doing is stealing people away from the CBD to put them in another space for the benefit of that, for that retail hub. So I think we would coexist absolutely. We're not questioning the validity of progress. It's about oversight and being aware of what those issues are for the businesses in town. Because, we don't want to compromise that township feel that Napier is so well known for and people come here for.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions? Hey, well, thanks very much for your presentation. Well done, and questions well answered. So thank you.
Thanks, team. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have any announcements by the Mayor? No announcements. I've just got one announcement, and this will really shock you, but John and I are going to put a paper up at the next Sustainable Napier meeting with a working group for indoor facilities. So I won't have to mention it too much over the next 6 weeks, but that's what's coming forward for you.
Indoor sports. Indoor sports?
Yeah,
Yep.
indoor sports facility, sorry.
Hooray.
I thought you might have known. Any announcements by management?
Yes, please. Through you, Mr. Chair.
Certainly.
Just like to take this opportunity to provide a brief update to the elected members around 2 reviews that we currently have underway. Firstly, our review into chlorine-free capable water supply network. As you will recall, we have a 2-stage procurement process approved by Council currently underway. That first stage is expressions of interest stage that will then lead to a shortlisting for a request for proposal. So the ROI stage has now closed off for the submission of applications. we've had 7 submissions from a number of parties, and those submissions are now with the tender evaluation team for them to evaluate. The next stage is they recommend a shortlist to myself. I will discuss that with the portfolio owner and the chairperson, and then we'll recommend going forward who that shortlist might be. So that's great news. A lot of work being done around that, and we're getting some traction and some progress in that space. The other review is our regional Three Waters management review that is looking to move into phase 2 of that review. You will have all seen the media coverage on the confirmation of government funding of $1.55 million. So very shortly we'll be commencing multiple work streams to progress that phase of work. It may interest you to know that a number of other regions are following in Hawke's Bay's footsteps. Following means that we're leading, which I think is a pretty positive thing. There's certainly been some high interest in what we are doing, and it's gaining great support from our local government minister, Mahuta. In future, we'll look to bring perhaps a bit more structured updates to this committee as we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Nothing else? Thank you. There's no confirmation of minutes, so we move on to agenda item number 1.
Mr. Chair, just a procedural matter. I think we have missed discussion of minor matters.
Sorry.
Oh, yeah, under that's announcements by the
It's
chair.
all
could
in
you
one
see
there.
that?
Yeah. Okay, so any minor matters or discussion of minor matters?
Yeah, thank you. I actually have 3, if that's all right for you.
Yes.
One is discussion of the public forum, if we can discuss that in minor matters. The next is I'd just like to update Council on the opening of Te Kohangahanga Atifai. And the third is I wonder if we could have an update on the dirty water projects as well at the end of the meeting. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Sorry about that. So we move on to agenda item number 1, which is the National Aquarium detailed business case, and I'd ask Antoinette to come in.
Oh, that'll be the design.
No, because it's in here. But you probably check it.
Kia ora koutou. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, thank you.
I'd just like to introduce the council to the General Manager of the National Aquarium, Rachel Hayden, for those who have not met her, and of course Principal Māori Advisor Charles Rupatini. We might also be drawing on Drew Brown, the Project Manager on this project, to answer any questions that you might have too. So the purpose of this report is to present you with the detailed business case, and pending discussions with government ministers, recommend applying to the PGF and other government funds. We're also seeking approval to progress the communications and engagement plan in consultation with the Napier community. Since the development of the indicative business case, the scope of the proposal to redevelop our aquarium has changed considerably, particularly with what was consulted on in the 2018 LTP in terms of capital and operational costs. The business case and supporting documents you have before you is the result of a number of intensive and concurrent work streams involving significant stakeholder involvement, nationwide surveys, design hui and cultural input. By way of background, this project began in 2017 when the indicative business case was carried out by local consultants Giblin Group. The indicative business case investigated the feasibility of expanding the current National Aquarium with the objectives of becoming a unique tourist destination, a leader in environmental education, and a showcase for research being undertaken in the land-to-sea environment. The draft indicative case was submitted to the Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment at the end of 2017, and following feedback in 2018 was amended to clarify the primary objective, strengthen the tourism objectives, and evidence the economic gains of the research objectives. Later in 2018, Council entered into an agreement with MB to progress to the development of a full business case, which was tendered and eventually awarded to Te Moana Limited in early 2019. The development of the detailed business case involved comprehensive stakeholder engagement with Māori, youth, and the tourism, conservation, education and research sectors. An architectural and exhibit design concept was developed by EHDD, San Francisco-based aquarium designers, on the basis of that stakeholder engagement. The proposal is underpinned by a strong Māori kaupapa that can be easily translated to a general audience. This is what makes the proposal so unique. While New Zealand is regarded as a leader in Indigenous tourism by our Australian neighbours, nothing like this proposal has been developed in New Zealand or in the world. By way of background, the report provides a brief history of how the National Aquarium came to be, and the full historical record is attached as Attachment V. The full record provides a very interesting and somewhat colourful account of where the idea for the aquarium originated in the 1950s and the Council's decisions over the years to get it to where it is now. The last major expansion was in 2002, when the aquarium was opened by Prime Minister Helen Clark and declared the National Aquarium of New Zealand. This expansion involved the construction of the northern wing, adjoining the original 1970s circular building. Since 2002, the aquarium has evolved in an ad hoc manner with the addition of the nocturnal kiwi enclosure, the alligator exhibit, the little blue penguins relocated from Marineland, and more recently the installation of the East Coast Lab, or Life at the Boundary, in 2016. Despite attempts to maintain the aquarium's relevance, we can no longer meet the needs of our customers, the animals and our staff. It is increasingly difficult to meet modern-day aquaria purposes of environmental education and conservation. The current facility's visitor journey is confusing, as well as the makeup of the collection species. Modern aquaria are underpinned by meaningful conservation work that inspires behavioural change in our visitors. They are expected to have large-scale exhibits where animal welfare is paramount. The size and accessibility of the current exhibits means they are no longer fit for purpose. With regard to the condition of the buildings, a number of assessments have identified that the buildings, mechanical and electrical equipment and life support systems are in average to poor state. Work is currently being carried out to address the urgent areas requiring attention at a not insignificant cost. Detailed seismic assessments have been carried out on both the original 1970s building and the 2002 expansion, and both assessments have identified risks and remedial works required. EHDD was also commissioned to assess the design and condition of the current facility. They found extensive corrosion of systems and degradation of finishes throughout, of which most of you have seen firsthand. Their assessment recommended demolition of the 1970s structure, as the cost of reuse would likely be high. However, the 2002 building presents better potential for reuse. The design concept of the new aquarium, carried out by EHDD, plans a visitor journey beginning in an orientation lobby representing Indigenous cultures of the Pacific Rim. From this lobby, which can double up as a welcoming and functions area, the visitor is plunged into darkness and enters the domain of Tangaroa and the deep sea, where augmented representation of these ecosystems are displayed. The visitor journey then emerges into the light and encounters a large subtropical sea turtle tank, temperate shark tanks, giant kelp forest tanks, an outdoor little blue penguin exhibit and stingray pools. interspersed between these signature exhibits will be jewel tanks, which consist of smaller exhibits such as jellyfish, seahorses, starfish and crustaceans. The EHDD design also factors in resilience in the face of surge events caused by sea level rise, king tides and flooding, and the design mitigates against such events. This brings us to the detailed business case. The method followed was Treasury's 5-case model, which assessed the strategic, economic, financial, commercial and management cases for change. In the development of the detailed business case, it became apparent that a cultural case for change was emerging from stakeholder consultation. At the end of my introduction to this paper, I will ask that the Principal Māori Advisor, Mr. Ropatini, talks to the cultural narrative and how it is integral to the business case and design. To summarise the business case, it found that the strategic case was compelling. The economic case projects that 31 million of regional GDP will be generated from construction, with a further 50 million of national GDP. The facility operations is projected to generate 17 million per annum to the regional GDP, with a further 9 million nationally. The social return on investment, which quantifies the social and economic benefits, is estimated to be 45 million. The total capital cost of the project is 77.5 million, which includes 65.6 million of construction costs, 7 million in contingency and 4.9 million associated with cost escalations during the construction period. The annual operating deficit of between 3 to 5 million has been based on a model which factors 180,000 visitors in the first year of operation. This is considered conservative, considering that in the first year of operation of the Hawke's Bay Aquarium in 1976, that visitor numbers, mainly from domestic visitation, reached over 230,000. This occurred at a time when New Zealand only had a population of 3 million compared to today's nearly 5 million. Back then, Napier also did not have the international cruise traffic that it enjoys now, and international tourism to New Zealand has grown from less than 400,000 in the 70s to nearly 4 million in 2019. The potential to capture a much greater share of this international tourism market to Hawke's Bay may indeed be greater than the conventional business case calculations. The annual operating cost calculations account for depreciation, which Council may choose to not fund, which will reduce the subsidy required. Other opportunities to reduce the operating deficit are additional revenue generating options such as functions and events, tailored programs, tours and experiences, and corporate packages. It is the intention to establish a charitable trust to operate the National Aquarium, with the charitable objectives being for conservation education purposes. A charitable trust is more likely to attract donations and grants for its operations, further offsetting total operational costs. Further information will need to be sought around the net cost, and the net ratepayer cost variance will need to be included in the next long-term plan should the proposal proceed. It is recommended that community engagement is carried out given the change in the total capital cost of the project from 53 million to 77.5 million and the higher annual operational costs. Council's commitment in its current LTP is 10.2 million, and discussions with the MB have indicated that up to 35 million will be sought from government. The assessment of any such application will likely require Cabinet approval, and meetings with the relevant ministers are currently being organised through Minister Nash's office. The revenue generation strategy has been reviewed and updated and an implementation plan developed. The strategy proposes a two-phase fundraising campaign of $20 million each. Should government support for the project be confirmed, a separate paper will come to you recommending the establishment of a funding trust to receive funds received through the implementation of the revenue generation strategy. Options for the establishment of an operating trust to govern the new facility will also be worked through with the appropriate authorities and will also be the subject of a later report. A number of internal and community risks have been identified and set out in the paper. The main ones being cost escalations due to time delays and also potential closure of the current facility before a new one is built due to failing infrastructure. It is also noted that internal resources to carry out this project may not be sufficient. The community risks identified include limited knowledge or visibility of the project and how it is funded, and the potential community perception that this project will divert resources and funding from Council's priorities, such as resolving Napier's water network issues. The revenue generation strategy identifies the main fundraising risk as competition for funds. However, the more significant regional projects in the pipeline are not viewed as being overly competitive with the aquarium for philanthropic funding. So before I summarise the options available to Council and recommendations, I would like to invite Principal Māori Advisor, Mr Ropatini, to summarise the cultural narrative of the proposal for you.
Tēnā koutou ngā kaikauni hira, tēnā koe te te amana e te mare kura, tātou katoa nei ra te mihi mai o hā ki a koutou. I must acknowledge that the work that has been done on this cultural case is not the work of myself alone, but the work of many. So I pay attribute to the Ngāti Kahungunu Iwi Incorporated Board, in particular Nigel Howe, who has supported us on this process, Carl Wixon from Arahia Pathfinders, and our team from Te Moana Limited. As Antoinette has outlined, with this cultural case, we have bucked the trend and challenged the MB Better Business case to place a cultural case right at the heart of this proposition, because what we have developed and put in front of you today is an aquarium that we believe truly meets the expectations of the Treaty of Waitangi as it carries a national title. The current aquarium has a footprint of about 5% representation of the Māori culture, and the rationale behind this cultural case is to create a proposition that shows equality and equity as aligned and expected with the Treaty of Waitangi. We held an initial consultation hui with Te Matawa Maui Māori leaders in November 2017, and that the outcome of that hui was a challenging statement to imagine a Māori aquarium, which does not sit well in the Māori psyche, because the aquarium is the natural environment in which our relations of Tangaroa live. Since then, that statement of imagining a Māori aquarium has been placed at the heart of this business case process, and the outcome is a cultural design that is best practice in its physical design. The design represents our national icon of the North Island, Te Ika a Maui. The cultural design has been built into the visitor experience to make our Māori culture more accessible to the mainstream. A lot of our culture is intangible, and our cultural heritage is certainly intangible, and the visitor experience built into this business case is to make our culture tangible and available for all New Zealanders to be a part of. The cultural return on investment is included in the business case. There was a challenge from our Māori leaders here to consider cultural return on investment in dollar terms. However, there is not a model that exists that assesses culture and the return on investment in culture. So within Appendix M of the detailed business case, the cultural case on page 35 outlines the benefits and states that Māori expect a wider range of non-commercial cultural benefits, some of which is mapped below. The non-commercial cultural benefits in Māoridom are always balanced with commercial and economic potential, specifically when we're relating projects to the environment. And this has, of course, been turned into a table within the detailed business case on page 26, which forms the basis of what we call a cultural return on investment that allows this project, should it go ahead, to credibly engage with Ngāti Kahungunu Iwi Incorporated and post-settlement governance entities within the Ngāti Kahungunu Iwi as a first opportunity to partner with this project both culturally and financially. Throughout this process, when we had EHDD visit Napier, we took them to Peka Peka wetland outside of Pakipaki and to Waimarama Beach, and we shared elements of our culture with the designers from San Francisco. They were very receptive to incorporating indigeneity into Aquaria, and we know through their feedback that this is a global first. To build an aquarium based on Indigenous knowledge first and foremost has not been done globally by aquarium designers. To back all of this up, this week the Southern Science Challenge have produced a report around the threat of climate change and environmental change to the tourist economy. International visitors to New Zealand now are seeing the impact of climate change to our economy. We have the gannet tours out to Cape Kidnappers impacted by slips and whatnot. And the outcome and the recommendation of that Southern Science Challenge report was to marry Indigenous knowledge with Western science to look at how we could collectively take better care of our environment and one of our primary industries, which is tourism. The business case for this aquarium development also follows that line of marrying Indigenous knowledge with Western science for a better understanding of our environment in its whole. Fundamentally, it's not acceptable for Māori, to Māori, for our relations of tangaroa to be kept in captivity for entertainment. However, it is acceptable to a certain degree that our relations of tangaroa do hold mana, and that if they are kept in captivity, that their Māori and Polynesian stories, and indeed the Indigenous stories of the Pacific Rim, are told to their fullest extent through the eyes of our relations of tangaroa. And that is what forms the basis of this cultural case. I'm proud of our team for challenging MB to include a cultural case. It would have been inappropriate to present a cultural proposition without including a cultural case to provide the context in which the design is presented to you and the visitor experience is presented to you also. I have one final comment around the revenue generation strategy, and that's that the Ngāti Kahungunu post-settlement governance entities were not interviewed as a part of that process, and should the business case go ahead and a project's established, we do need to get in front of our Ngāti Kahungunu post-settlement governance entities, and we do have the support of Ngāti Kahungunu Iwi Incorporated through which to do that. So I think we've got a very credible case to present to our Māori partners and indeed our iwi before going out beyond to other Māori authorities to partner with this project, and therefore we've followed best practice, and this business case is in a very good position to engage with our Māori people locally and nationally. Kia ora.
Kia
ora, Charles. Just before we take questions, I'd like to invite Ms Hayden to to elaborate on the changing nature of Aquaria internationally, from the purpose for tourist attractions to the conservation education purpose of today.
I think Jacques Cousteau put it best when he is famously quoted as saying people value what they love, and this is our aspiration for this place. It is about connection beyond awareness raising, just facts, killer facts presented on signage or delivered through talks. It is about fostering awe and wonder through, yes, incredibly large-scale exhibits representing ecosystems, but encouraging individual connection. And part of that is through narratives such as my colleague Charles has just discussed, in addition to allowing motivation and facilitation to undertake real behaviour change. The challenge that zoos and aquariums face, modern zoos and aquariums face that do invest in conservation action through their staff, for their visitors, is evidencing that impact of that behaviour change. So learning, research and evaluation is a really key part of that practice. But if we are to have any integrity at all, we must align ourselves as a modern aquarium that is true to their words that they will action behaviour change. This will be within our walls, but it will also be breaking down those physical barriers, getting people out into nature, getting them involved in conservation work with our partners or led by ourselves that results in collective action. So I think, for us, it is the attitudes and values. It is being able to see the residents homed in the aquarium through the lens of your individual culture. It is a place to be able to tell your stories or voice your concerns, be a place of debate where all opinions are welcomed to discuss some of these challenges that we are facing with the environment, particularly in a region like Hawke's Bay. So this is an incredible opportunity for us to really be incredibly inclusive with our community, both regionally and nationally, and do it properly. Thank you.
Kia ora, Rachel. So the options we have put before you are to approve the detailed business case and stage 2 of the communications and engagement plan, and to enter into discussions with ministers on the national significance of the projects before applying to the Provincial Growth Fund and other funds. And the alternative is to continue with the status quo, which is not sustainable in the short to medium term. We've estimated that the current facility will be no longer viable in 5 years. However, this may be brought forward if we have a major infrastructure failure in the meantime. The recommendations are therefore to receive the detailed business case, to note the additional PGF funding for completion of the business case is yet to be confirmed pending meeting with the ministers, to note the increased annual operational cost and that alternative options to offset this are being explored, to approve the high-level communications and engagement plan for community consultation, and to apply to MB for PGF and other government funding, and to receive the National Aquarium and Oceans Centre concept design. Thank you.
So, question time. Questions, please.
Thank you. Through the chair, have we had any indication of the timeframes of a conversation with the ministers?
That's still been arranged through Minister Nash's office.
Okay. And will that happen before we submit the PGF application?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It has to.
Deputy Mayor.
Would you mind just clarifying for me, did we receive official support from Ngāti Kahungunu, you mentioned, Charles, for moving forward with the detailed business case?
Yes, we do have formal support from Ngāti Kahungunu Iwi Incorporated, and they've endorsed that support in 2 phases. The first endorsement was the commencement of this project to develop the business case, in which the board appointed Nigel Howe, the representative for Wairoa and also a curator at Wairoa Museum, to partner with this project. The outcome and the satisfaction that we have included a core cultural concept has led to them committing to support and also to accompany the Mayor to the ministerial meeting in Wellington to show that support physically and in the form of letters for the PGF application.
Any other questions? Do I have a mover for the...
Happy.
Oh, sorry, you got a question?
Yeah, do have a couple of questions. Just through you, Mr. Chair, just to follow on from really Deputy Mayor Brosnan's questions, there are a couple of other key partners that I'd like to see some formal support coming from. I've heard lots of informal reports, but we've got to go with what's written in front of us. And one of those is Hawkesbury Regional Council. Could you give us some confidence around how conversations are going with this key partner in regards to us looking to move and build in this environmental space?
Through the Chair, that's part of the next step in terms of community and stakeholder consultation. We need to talk with the other councils. We have had informal conversations at the CE level, but we need to get our proposal in front of those councils. So.
And one other sort of follow-up question for me is, I remember last year that there were going to be some meetings with central ministers and central departments prior to Christmas, and the report says that they were mostly verbal and there was no written content from those, but there must be some way that we are making sure that we're addressing the information that was given to us from those meetings. So where do we get a chance to get an insight on what were the indicators, concerns, risks, or love features of that these ministers showed in those engagements?
Could you just clarify that, please, Councillor? I'm not quite sure which meeting
So
you referred to.
my memory was that there was going to be a meeting, we're now March. So before, about the time Council itself went for a tour of the current facility, was the same time that the EHDD report came back. During that same week, there was supposed to be a meeting with our staff in Wellington to discuss some key components around the Shapeshifter project. And we were going to get some feedback around what those indicators were. The only feedback I saw in this was that there was nothing in writing. So
Through the Chair, but that meeting with ministers is still to be set down. We were hoping to meet with them before Christmas, but because Christmas came upon us pretty quickly, it was very difficult to get those meetings in a timely fashion. So because most of the ministers have only just started coming back to work, now we're starting to plan those meetings.
okay, so it's just moved out a little bit.
Yes.
Yeah, hopefully this month sometime.
Okay, cool. Oh, well, I'll wait until we hear back from our central ministry, really, because
Just an answer to your first question, that Matariki is involved in it, which will be the network you're talking about with regional council.
So, Councillor, through Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Yeah, so just to add to what the Chair is saying, so this project sits within the Matariki Regional Development Plan under the economic and social actions, and so all the councils are obviously aware of that plan and signed off on it, so there's visibility on it. The next part is to take the business case and actually go and have some engagement, some discussions with them.
thank you. I've got a couple of other questions through you, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
So the first one actually is around our projected figures. So first of all, this represents absolutely fantastic work. I love the work that's been done in here. I still have concerns and reservations, but this is a lot of reading, which is only a small indicator of the amount of work that our team have put into getting us to this stage. I also want to acknowledge that when we originally were approached as a council around the challenges of the aquarium, the original concept put before us was we have a dilapidating facility, we have growing costs, and we need a strategy to address change. So I want to commend our staff in the way that they recognised very early that actually just a repair wasn't going to do it for our city, and that a quick plaster over the top of these issues was not the long-term sustainable solution, nor would it add value to our economy or our vibrancy as a city. So I just want to acknowledge the way the staff recognised that early, came back to council and identified that we need to go a bit bigger.
Excuse me, Councillor Tapney, we're in question time at the moment.
Yep, so the question is, fantastic work, but the projections around tourism numbers, how confident are we given that there are many fluctuations we can impact on that? And I'm thinking particularly right now of coronavirus and closed Chinese borders. 90 ships a year, and the one virus is now at a global pandemic stage. So how are we going to achieve a level of we can't forecast these types of things, but we're putting a lot of weight on the tourism numbers that will be coming through our country and particularly through our region. And as we've seen with the coronavirus, I'm wondering how confident are our staff around those projected figures, given they were put together probably before coronavirus was public knowledge?
The projections are put together based on, business as usual. We can't forecast projections based on pandemics or any other disasters.
Okay. We just got to do the best we can.
And they are very conservative figures too.
Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Brosnan.
Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Brosnan.
That's fine. I just have a couple of questions around the financial risks identified in the business case, and I wonder if we could hear from, in particular, I suppose, from the context of a ratepayer and ongoing operational cost perspective. I wonder if I could hear from the head of our finance director around the input that's had from our perspective into that business case and how we feel about those potential financial risks.
Oh, you can. Ready to talk it?
Yeah, we can talk first, and that's about the covering of the net deficit with the government first instance.
I'm not too sure what you mean.
Through the chair. So, in relation to the financial figures for the operation, a business case is effectively a starting point for the discussion. What Antoinette Campbell has identified is there's some opportunities for us to look at the way that the financial model has been put together. So, yes, there is a net operating deficit at the moment of between 3 and 5 million over time. However, there is some opportunities for council to consider whether or not it would actually do a full depreciation model on that particular building, because it might be a consideration that you're not going to replace it at the end of the useful life of that building due to its location, for example. So there are some opportunities in that space. The other opportunity for council is to, in the discussions with government, is to consider whether they will actually cover off any of the net operating costs, but that's obviously a separate discussion. So there are many other avenues available to council from here on how that might be managed. The current net deficit is sitting with council as it rests at the moment in full, and so that's between or around about the $1 million mark. But we are looking to improve that as an opportunity going forward. But what's been identified is that full picture, but again, it's a starting point for how we might manage that going forward.
Through you, just a couple more follow-up questions. So, Adele, you mentioned the financial model used in the formation of the business case. Have you had an opportunity to review that from our perspective? Are we comfortable? Do you have any concerns around any of the financial modelling that's been used?
Yeah. Through the chair, so we have a specialist project accountant that has been brought on for council, and he's involved with all of our significant projects and is very good at financial modelling. So he's been partnering with the PW, Te Moana, and their specialist people involved with putting together the financial side of the business case. So we're quite comfortable that there's been some joint effort around how that's coming together and with the full understanding about what's required from a council perspective.
Yeah, and you think all of the risks identified in the business, all the risks are identified through the business case from your perspective?
In relation to the financial risk?
That's correct.
Yes, I think they are. I think what we've got is a very transparent idea around what those costs are, and as I said, there's opportunity to review those further as we work in a bit more detail around the project itself. But there was the initial full picture without then trying to then peel that back where we possibly could, or again looking to improve visitor numbers. We've tried to take a very conservative approach on that, so it's kind of the worst. I would hope to be a worst case scenario. There's nothing like putting forward something that we don't believe it will be actually really realistic at the end of the day.
I do have some more, but I won't. I'll let others ask questions. Yeah.
Through the chair, there's quite a significant fundraising campaign required to get the $40 million has been tagged through other fundraising sources. What confidence levels do we have around achieving that target of 40 million?
Through the chair, the specialist fundraisers who pulled together the strategy review and implementation plan in their discussions and interviews with potential sponsors and philanthropists, high net worth individuals. They have been very positive. They have seen this project as one that those high net worth individuals will want to invest in. And if you have a look at the strategy and implementation plan, which are part of your appendices, you will see that some have actually self-nominated to invest in the project should it go ahead, for some considerable amounts too. The implementation plan states that it's really important to get a high net worth individual to put their hand up, say that they're going to invest, and that actually helps to engage other companies and sponsors and individuals to say that, you know, if they're going to back it, we'll back it too. So hopefully once we get the ball rolling, but the revenue generation specialists are confident, so we're confident too.
And just further to that, have we set, or within that fundraising campaign, what are our objectives with regard to our Māori partners? Have we had support already that they are looking to make a financial investment in the project?
Through the chair, I think Charles did cover that off just before. Did you want to elaborate, Charles? We need more seats.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the fact that we have a very compelling cultural case is an invitation for Māori to invest both financially and culturally into this facility. We've had conversations only, and the verbal indication is that there would be a high willingness for particular Māori entities to invest into this project. Whether that is within Ngāti Kahungunu or whether that is outside of Ngāti Kahungunu, both of those avenues have merit. However, we've not been able to put anything in front of them until we've completed this business case process. So the intent being signalled back is positive, and that is really driven by what you see in front of you as a strong and compelling cultural case.
Okay. So further to that, bearing in mind that we've received criticism historically about not engaging with our Māori partners early enough in a process, are there any concerns or risks that we may have left this too late to gain their support?
I think the risk actually would have been if we had gone out too early without the detail of the business case to say what we were actually asking for. We've followed best practice in terms of cultural design and engaging those that we require to engage for the short time that we've had to develop this business case. Certainly we do need to engage more. However, my advice has been not to engage until we have the detailed business case completed to actually put in front of people to say what it is that we're developing. We've had the support and backing of Ngāti Kahungunu Iwi Incorporated, and as a national facility, we've deferred to our treaty partner that is tasked with the responsibility of looking after water as a water-based claim from the fisheries. So the alignment with Ngāti Kahungunu Iwi Incorporated is appropriate for the development of this business case. And now that we're at another point in time with this business case, we do need to go out wider. My advice has been to go to Ngāti Kahungunu entities first and foremost, given that this aquarium sits within Ngāti Kahungunu that is culturally appropriate, and then to step outside of Ngāti Kahungunu to the rest of Māoridom to present this business case.
Deputy Mayor, Ross.
A couple of questions. One is maybe one you can't answer, but it is why, and I note it's in the recommendations, why has the government not fronted up yet with the second half of the increased business case costs? We discussed that at council over 9 months ago.
Through the chair, we haven't had confirmation whether our application has been approved or otherwise yet. So we were hoping to have that discussion with the ministers to find out where that's at.
Have you had any indication or any discussion about that application with them?
No, I haven't.
Okay. And the second question is probably a financial one, but you might be able to answer it, Antoinette. So I'd like to run through, I suppose, the worst case scenario. So say council took the recommendations as they are now, we move through a consultation process, accept business cases, etc. And we get to a point where, say, the income can't be generated, the capital cost can't be sought from other sources, and it's unaffordable for Napier. How much has it cost us to get to that point?
I would have to come back to you with a calculation.
What is the financial repercussions of this decision?
That's difficult to answer.
Quantify, yeah.
Yeah.
Through Mr. Chair. So obviously you've got the cost of the business case, which is a cost which is sunk now. In terms of the revenue generation, there is cost to undertake that, but we need to look at different ways to do that. Arthright put in some indicative cost for it, but there are other avenues in terms of how you do that revenue generation. But I think the first part really is you need to get the government on board with it. If you don't get the government back into it, then that obviously then calls into question how the project progresses.
So do we know what the next stage will cost us if the government doesn't come on board?
If the government doesn't come on board, then it doesn't progress.
So it costs us nothing?
Correct. No. What would cost you in terms of the business case?
Then we would have to revisit our options in terms of what we do with the facility going forward, which will probably be a single stage business case.
And sorry, Mr. Chair, but this seems like a key point to me. What does the government coming on board mean? What is that gateway? What is the conditions around that?
That's pending discussions with the ministers. We need to have those discussions to confirm what their support will be in terms of potential for capital funding and potential to fund any operational costs going forward.
And because
this is a project of national significance, and if the government do acknowledge that and are willing to support that, then I think we can progress. But if they don't, that's when we need to come back to you with alternative options.
Can I just add to that, Mr. Chair? So in terms of the process for the Provincial Growth Fund, they have limits in terms of what they can approve within the Provincial Growth Fund. So they have, I think it's up to 10 million sits within the Provincial Growth Fund, and then up to 20 million, I think, is with the regional ministers, which is the group that we're wanting to meet with. But because we're saying this is a project of national significance and it needs to have a higher level of funding, it needs to go to cabinet. And the indications and all the comments from the Provincial Growth Fund is that this project does need to be seen by cabinet. If you look at where this project would sit in terms of a portfolio within government, it would sit within arts, cultural and heritage, which is a portfolio which is run by the Prime Minister. There has been no project through the Provincial Growth Fund which has gone through such a detailed process such as this, and there's been no project which has gone to Cabinet for approval. So this is unique in its approach, which is why we need to get government on board.
Through you, Mr. Chair, if I could add to that, through the process of developing the business case and the interviews that we had with other national institutions of similar likeness, it was made aware to us that this national aquarium has never been brought into the fabric of other like national institutions, such as Te Papa, the Māori Arts and Crafts Institute, Te Puia at Rotorua, the Treaty Grounds at Waitangi, and the National Archives. We're not talking about apples for apples when we talk about national institutions, and they all have their own legislation and their own protection and funding mechanisms. This National Aquarium of New Zealand's been carried by Napier City Council on behalf of the nation, and that's the conversation that needs to be had in Wellington as to how is central government going to protect and support Napier City Council's aspirations in this business case.
Yeah, and I suppose through you, Mr. Chair, my question is, how much cost does it take us to get to an answer at that level? Because it's not like we're having one conversation at a national level and we're not doing anything else on this project. You've got a whole consultation plan that you want to roll out while those conversations are happening. So what I would like to know is, what it's going to cost us to get to a decision, a conversation, an answer from government on that, because I don't want to be coming back here and they say no and we've sunk another 50,000, for instance. Is anyone able to quantify that?
There's no cost.
So I guess through the chair, in terms of the community consultation and engagement, there will be some costs, but they'll be from existing budgets through our community engagement team.
Yeah, just in terms of government, there's no cost. So the business case has been completed. It's now just a case of presenting that to them. Well, there's a cost in terms of getting travel down there, but there's no further cost in terms of the development of the business case.
Sorry. Through the chair, if I can just elaborate further on Deputy Mayor Brosnan's question. I guess there will be costs associated with resourcing internally to move forward with the comms engagement plan, which I have concerns with moving forward with that full stop without confirmation of central government funding in the first place. We're seeking reassurance that we're not going to be investing a significant amount of internal resourcing on this project, considering all the other priorities that we have, prior to having confirmation of some level of central government funding, which, based on the business case, we're seeking a minimum of 35 million.
Through the chair, we're not looking to add any internal resourcing. We're using existing internal resources. We're not looking to add to that resource for the community and consultation and engagement.
Yeah, okay. And again, not suggesting that you're looking to add anything more, suggesting that resourcing could be better used elsewhere, the existing resourcing. Sorry.
Mr. Chair, that's correct. We wouldn't be looking to start any community engagement until we've actually had that agreement from government.
Brown.
Would it be possible for it to come back to us then to approve the community, the comms engagement after we've got that answer?
So, just in a nutshell, the clear thing is it hinges on one decision by the government before we can go anywhere. Would that be right? Thank you. That was a nod yes, was it?
Yes,
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Councillor Bowe.
Just the recommendation in front of us says that we approve the higher level communications and engagement and commence community engagement. Now, this is not what we're being told right now, so that would need to change if we're going to have to wait till we get approval from the government that they will be putting significant amounts of money into it.
Through the chair, we can remove recommendation D. That suits.
Yeah.
Remove or amend?
Maybe we just finish the questions and then we'll move the motion, and it might get some alterations made, perhaps.
Yeah.
Just guessing. So, I wouldn't do that. We won't amend anything at this stage.
No,
This
I'm
time.
just
Yeah. Just comment on it.
Question,
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions?
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
To my left.
Is there any risk if we're receiving the concept design that, say, our iwi partners or our government partners through the next stage of this want to make changes to that design, consultation, for instance, with the public may see design changes? Is it just that we're receiving it? It doesn't matter if further changes are made to that? Some clarity?
Yeah, through the chair, that's why it is a concept design.
Yeah.
It is not the detailed design at this stage. It is still subject to changes.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I'd actually like to wait until our other two members come back, because probably they should be here if we're going to vote on something, so they hear everything.
We have a 5-minute adjournment there for toilet break.
We'll just have a 5-minute adjournment. Maybe they need to be told if they leave, they should let us know. Yeah.